Today is a year since England won the World Cup in 2019, and it's a story that needs to be told in various forms. And one of the forms that it has taken is in the shape of a book written by an old friend and the chief cricket correspondent of the Telegraph in London, Nick Hoult, who joins us and who has just released this new book called Morgan's Men, which is co-authored with a former English cricketer, Steve James, and who's also a colleague of Nick. Welcome to this chat, Nick. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, good. Thank you for having me.
Nick, how did the idea about this book come about?
Well, just before the World Cup, I wrote a long-form piece for the Telegraph. It was about 7,000 words, which, as you know, is quite long for a newspaper. And it was the inside story of England's journey to the World Cup, because obviously they had such a disappointing 2015. So I thought then, well, there's definitely a book in this if England go on to win the World Cup. Steve had a similar idea. We share an agent, and then in the week leading up to the final, we put the idea to a couple of publishers, and then of course after that sort of such a momentous game at Lord's, we managed to get a deal within a couple of days. So Steve actually came up with the structure of the book. It starts with his report of the final and finishes with a piece on the Super Over. So in between that, we go back and tell the story of how they rebuilt the team, how they rebuilt their approach to one-day cricket. There is a report from each match in the World Cup, including the game against India. And each report isn't just a report of the game. It's a chance to profile a player who had a major impact on that match. So, for example, the first game we profiled Jofra Archer. And I was lucky enough to be in the Caribbean last year and during the England tour. And so I went and visited his old school and spoke to his old club mates for a piece of the paper. But obviously you have limited space in a newspaper, so a lot of it didn't get used. So a lot of it came in very handy for this book. So that was the idea of the book. It's basically a piece of reportage on what happened and when, because I was at every net practice, every press conference, every match for pretty much 4 years. And it's those observations and those little nuggets of news stories that perhaps would have missed at the time, all brought together in one place.
And is your book really like a summary of why winning the World Cup is not just about doing well in those 45 days, but about building up over 4 years like England did? Because it's a study that every team probably needs to follow, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, England's 4 years leading into the World Cup were really one of unheralded success for them. They broke batting records. They beat every team in the world. They became number one in the world. But actually, during the World Cup, they found it very difficult. It was a real up and down tournament for them. They spent 4 years smashing the ball out of the ground on belting batting pitches in England, which you don't always see, as you know. And then the World Cup came around, and the groundsman obviously produced much slower pitches that turned to bring other teams into the tournament, and England had to adapt very quickly. And they very nearly went out in the group stage. If they hadn't have beaten India and New Zealand in the final two games, they wouldn't have made the final, or they wouldn't have made the semi-final. So yeah, yes, there was... It's not just about the 4 years. Those 4 years help you cope with all of the pressures and the mistakes and everything else that happened during the tournament.
Where did the real strategy planning happen? When? Was it right when they got knocked out in the 2015 edition, or was it a gradual process with Trevor Bayliss coming in and so on and so forth?
It happened really, I suppose the genesis of it was during that 2015 tournament. Eoin Morgan was clearly not comfortable with the team he was given and the tactics and the strategy. He was a very new captain at that point, so he didn't really have an awful lot of power. After the tournament, England sacked the director of the England team, Paul Downton, and they appointed Andrew Strauss. And he realised that winning the World Cup would be their main objective. He decided to keep Morgan. They shared the same philosophy that you had to continually attack. Peter Moores was sacked as coach. They brought in Trevor Bayliss, really just to help them make that a reality, because Trevor had a great track record of success in white ball competitions around the world. And so once they struck upon a strategy, they identified the fact that they had the batsmen to deliver it in Stokes, Buttler, Morgan, Root, Hales, Roy, Bairstow. They had a lot of firepower. So they played to those strengths. They then employed the Nathan Lehman, the team's analyst, to give them real kind of clear direction on the sort of things they would need, such as strike rates in the first 10 overs, how a real key was batting at a run of ball in the middle overs against the spinners. They had decent players of spin like Buttler and Morgan and Root. So the aim was to bat a run and over, a run of ball, 6 and over during those middle overs, and then really go for it at the end. But the interesting thing that Nathan said to them is that at the 2015 World Cup, if you remember, the fielding restrictions were different, and the last 10 overs were just brutal. It was when it rained 4s and 6s. Well, they changed the restrictions to the 2019 tournament. And so he said, well, it's no longer that thrash at the end. You have to look at it as like a cyclist on a time trial. So when you watch the Tour de France or any of those sort of things, it's a steady accumulation all the way through to the end. And so that was the plan, was to take down the new ball, keep ticking over, but keep being positive in those middle overs, not holding back, going at a run a ball, and then really having a go at the end. And they're also lucky that a lot of the bowlers, like the Liam Plunketts of this world, the Chris Wokeses, Jofra Archer eventually as well, they can bat as well. I mean, Liam Plunkett was one of the cleanest 6-hitters in the team. And Adil Rashid as well at number 10. You know, they had batting all the way down, so they played to those strengths. They built that strategy in the wreckage of the 2015 tournament and really carried it on all the way through.
You call the book Morgan's Men. So it's really the work done by Eoin Morgan in those 4 years. Would you reckon it was a win fashioned by him?
Oh, I think so. I mean, Eoin was central to England's success. I mean, he was the heartbeat of everything. I mean, his leadership of the team on and off the field. They faced a lot of challenges. The Ben Stokes thing in Bristol, his arrest, lots of questions about the team's approach to life off the field at that point. He rewrote the team's ethical code with Joe Root, the Test captain. And we saw that in the weeks leading up to the tournament when he sacked Alex Hales from the squad. I mean, this was a man who had set England's record for the highest ever Test one-day innings. I mean, it was subsequently broken by Jason Roy, but a very important player in the team. He basically booted him out when he found that he'd failed that second drug test, because he basically lost the trust of the team. When I say lost the trust of the team, that actually means lost the trust of Eoin Morgan, and that was what mattered. And when Eoin said, I don't want this guy in my team, the other players fell in line straight away. So, yeah, Eoin was absolutely central. Without Eoin Morgan, without his clear-eyed leadership on and off the field, there's no way that England would have won the World Cup.
And England have clearly chosen two different paths, with Joe Root as the Test captain and Eoin Morgan as the white ball captain. And it's worked well, unlike in some other countries where there is clamour after a point of time to have one captain across the formats. It's worked well for England. What has made it work? Is it because of Morgan or is it because of Root?
Both, really. I think both guys have. I mean, Owen's not got any designs on being the captain of the Test team. He knows his Test career is over. He admitted himself he wasn't good enough as a Test batsman. So he was able just to focus on one job and winning the World Cup. So Joe Root could never really feel threatened as Test captain by Eoin Morgan's presence. Obviously, Alistair Cook was a captain for the first sort of 18 months of this setup. And the same for him, because he'd already been sacked as ODI captain. So he was never going to be a threat to Eoin. So it worked in that sense. And you also had in Strauss, a director of cricket, who had wielded an awful lot of power and a lot of respect from the people involved. So there was never really that sort of clash of egos that we may have seen with other teams and in England before, when this has been the case, split captaincy. And I just think there's a realisation these days that to do all three jobs is very, very draining. Not many can do it, and not many can do it well. In England, they play so much Test cricket compared to other countries, and I just don't think it's possible now to devote yourself to both jobs and do them both well. You possibly say somebody like Stokes and Root, they're the only two players that can definitely get in both teams anyway. And do you want to burden them with extra responsibility across the board in all formats? I don't think so. So there was never a clash. I mean, the only time you would say that there was a clash was that obviously England's Test cricket did decline in that period. And it just showed it was impossible really to kind of maintain those high standards in every format of the game. But I think England's Test cricket would have declined anyway. I don't think it was because of concentrating on one-day cricket. I just think players ageing, just possibly certain times confused strategy over picking ODI players for the Test team. But overall, I think they would have gone through evolution anyway and struggled at times in Test cricket.
And you're speaking about aging players. Two names come to my mind, James Anderson and Stuart Broad. A clear decision taken to leave them out of the white ball squad, though I think briefly Stuart Broad did make a comeback. Was that a difficult call in your view?
No, I think it was a very simple call. I think that I don't think Jimmy or Stuart Broad would have made it to the 2019 World Cup playing both forms of the game. I think that and both of them would rather play Test cricket. I think they love Test. They're that generation of English cricketer who loves the Test game. And I think that whilst they both said the right things about wanting to be selected for the white ball team, I think they were quite happy to sit back and concentrate on Test cricket and prolong their Test careers. And I think it also gave Morgan a lot more power, because I think to have two legends of the game in the dressing room brought up on one way of playing one-day cricket, I think that may have hampered some of the changes that Eoin wanted to make. He wanted a clean break with the past. So it was the right decision for both sides.
And which year was it when you thought, geez, we are on to something over here? Was between 2015 and 19, when you felt that this could possibly be England's crowning glory at the World Cup in 2019? Was that a particular year when you felt that, this has the makings of something big and you could document it in some way?
Well, not so much the documenting of it in a book, but I think we realised very quickly in 2015, that summer of 2015, when they played New Zealand, they narrowly lost the series 3-2 to Australia. They beat New Zealand, narrowly lost to Australia. You're thinking, well, those are the two teams that contested the recent World Cup final. And England have beaten New Zealand, and they've given the Aussies a real good go. And you just thought, they have got the firepower here in the batting. They've let the handbrake off. They've got real potential. They've got some very fine players. And obviously, with the World Cup being in English conditions, that makes such a huge difference. The hosts always get to the final, the semi-final. There was also a stat that if you make it into the top 3 of the world rankings 6 months before the tournament, you will get into the final generally. The only exception to that was India in 2011. Well, they hosted the tournament, so they were covered both ways, So I really felt that they had a great chance to have a really good tournament. We'd seen Buttler and Stokes become stars of the IPL. Morgan had vast IPL experience. The only weakness for England was always going to be the bowling. They lacked an X-factor bowler. But then somebody at the ECB, and this is the one story I've never cracked, and I would love to one day, I'm sure somebody in an office somewhere at the ECB found that they could find a loophole in their own rules to fast-track Jofra into the team.
And was it easy or difficult to track down some interesting nuggets from the players or the staff involved in the team for the book?
Not really, no. I mean, I think we were lucky because, this book was originally due to be published in November last year, but there was a problem with the publisher and image rights of the photo, so it's been delayed by 6 months. But the book was written last summer, which meant that we were talking to people with the euphoria of the moment. So people were quite happy to talk and tell us things. I mean, the story that's come out today in the serialisation of the Times and the Telegraph is Ben Stokes having a cigarette before he went out to bat in the Super Over. I mean, it's pretty hard to imagine Ronaldo having a fag before extra time in a World Cup final, but you know, it kind of adds to that Botham-esque image of Stokesy having a cigarette in the showers at Lord's before he goes out to bat. Now, we got that little nugget of information in the days after the World Cup final. Now, and I think if we'd have tried to write the book based on interviews a few months later, I think a lot of them would have clammed up a little bit, because I think a lot of players were then thinking about their own book deals and their own stories and wanting to say stuff and not being quite as loose-tongued. But like I say, in those giddy few days afterwards, you could fill your notepad with little bits of nuggets of information that, you know, made it into the book.
And what was the reaction in the press box when you made everybody know that you guys have come up with this book? I'm sure a few of them would have also thought about it, or are there more books coming out?
This, as far as I know, is the only book written about the World Cup, the story of England's World Cup win. Stokes has done his own book, which came out last year, and that's it. Really, there's nothing else. I mean, my colleagues have been very generous with some of their recollections as well, and my colleague Sheil Berry very kindly read the manuscript, and to have a man of his sort of you know, with his illustrious career behind him and his knowledge to read it was great value. Mike Atherton has done a little bit in the Times, obviously Steve's colleague. We've been very grateful to the help. No, the people have been very supportive.
And so how long did it take for you to put everything together?
We wrote it. I mean, I was writing it during the Ashes series after the World Cup, so it took about 6 or 7 weeks to write the manuscript, about 80,000 words. I like to say the structure was the key thing, and Steve's structure for the book gave clear direction. So, and we just divvied the chapters up. We've probably done roughly half each. I wrote the last 2 chapters. Steve did the first chapter, and then we split. There's then 3 chapters on the build up to the World Cup and how they changed their tactics and the ethics and the Ben Stokes affair and all that sort of stuff, and then the match reports, and we just split them between us, and it all worked really well. We read each other's copy, made suggestions, and yeah, it was a fairly smooth process. I mean, it's pretty hard work getting it all done so quickly, but I think that helped actually, because it was all still fresh in my own mind. You know, I could remember being at net practice at Edgbaston on the Wednesday when when Johnny Bairstow had lost his temper at some comments made by Michael Vaughan in the press, and I think, to be honest, if I'd have had to wait 6 months, I'd have forgotten all those little details. You know, so it did help actually having to write it down at the time.
And do you think that Ben Stokes has emerged as the superhero of English cricket since that win and the Ashes exploits of his? Has he reached is he on par with Sir Ian Botham now?
Oh, I think at the moment he is England's Botham. Yeah, he's the most high-profile cricketer in the country. He won BBC Sports Personality Year Award, first cricketer to do that since Andrew Flintoff. So, and also the first one to do it in the era when cricket is not on terrestrial TV in England. Because obviously he followed the World Cup final with the innings at Headingley, which is the most remarkable Test innings I've ever seen and ever will see. Yeah, I mean, there's more to come from Ben. Who knows? Will he be able to live up to it? I suppose that's a question you need. You know, we'll find out in the coming years. But yeah, he's the biggest figure in English cricket right now, no question.
And do you see England continuing on the path for more success in the T20 format as well, or that's a different strategy you think, or similar strategy?
Well, I mean, they reached the final 4 years ago in India, and it was only Carlos Brathwaite that denied them winning that World Cup. And to be honest, they overachieved in that tournament. They didn't go out there thinking they were going to win it. So I think in Australia, whenever that tournament happens, England on those flat batting pitches in Australia, I think there'll be a very strong T20 team with Buttler, Stokes, Jofra Archer, Bairstow, Roy. They've got some real ability there. They could win that tournament. I think the next 50 over World Cup in India, I think that's going to be very difficult for England to win in India. And it's a little way away. Some of the players will have aged a little bit by then. I can't see Owen carrying on until then. So you imagine Buttler will be the captain. To win the World Cup 2 tournaments running once in India would be one of the great achievements. So let's be satisfied with winning it in 2019 and being real contenders for the next T20 World Cup.
Nick, can you show us a copy of the book so that we can get everybody to have a look and probably buy it off Amazon in India and worldwide?
Yeah, Morgan's Men, lifting the World Cup. A moment I won't forget because I won't stop lifting the World Cup. The book is available in India. It's available in Australia. Don't think we'll be selling many copies there though.
On that note, thanks a lot, Nick, for your time, and all the best for the next test match when you'll be covering that for the Telegraph again. Enjoy reading your pieces as always. Guys, if you ever happen to want to know what's happening in cricket, English cricket, Nick Hoult is the man. Telegraph.co.uk. He's the man with the news, the inside scoops, and all the interviews. Please keep logging on to telegraph.co.uk so that you can read more from Nick Hoult on Telegraph. Thanks a lot, Nick, for your time.
Thanks, Chandrash. Good luck. Look after yourself. We'll see you soon.
Thanks a lot. See you soon. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.